Hello everyone, Pim here once again and welcome back to OWASP Mobile Top 10 series. And today we're discussing threat number 6, which is inadequate privacy controls. This risk focuses on how mobile applications handle user privacy, not just from security perspective but from a compliance and user rights perspective. We'll explore what inadequate privacy controls look like, how they are exploited, prevention strategies, and the significant business impacts. So let's get started. Inadequate privacy controls occur when mobile applications fail to properly manage user data privacy without its life cycle. This includes over-collection of data, where requesting more permissions than necessary, collecting data that isn't required for core functionality, and gathering location, contact, or media access without clear justifications are enabled in the application, and insufficient user consent, where the data is collected but without obtaining explicit consent from the end users, using pre-checked consent boxes, hiding privacy implications in lengthy terms of service, and failing to provide granular consent options. Lack of transparency, not disclosing what data is collected for, hiding third-party data sharing practices, failing to explain how data is used, and having no clear privacy policy or terms of use. Poor data minimization, where data is retained longer than necessary, storing complete data sets when aggregated data will suffice, not implementing data retention policies, failing to delete data when users request it, and finally inadequate user controls, where the user has no ability to review collected data, has no option to delete or export data, cannot revoke previously granted permissions, and has no way to opt out of data sharing. So the mobile context amplifies these risks. Mobile devices contain highly personal information, location history, contacts, photos, health data, and communication patterns. When apps mishandle this data, the privacy impact is severe. This is how inadequate privacy controls can be exploited, both from an attacker perspective and from the owner of the application. Okay? Privacy violations occur through both malicious exploitation and negligent practices. One is permission abuse, where malicious applications request broad permissions under false pretenses. This is actually one of the signs to flag malicious applications. For example, a flashlight app requests locations and contacts, a wallpaper application accessing the microphone, and just a normal game app requesting SMS permissions. And once these are granted, these permissions enable covert surveillance and tracking functionalities or capabilities, data harvesting for unauthorized purposes, and building detailed user profiles without consent. Number 2 is third-party SDK privacy leaks. Many applications integrate advertising, analytics, and social media SDKs without understanding what data these libraries collect. These SDKs often collect device identifiers and tracking data, access location even when the main app doesn't use it, share data with multiple third parties, and operate without explicit user consent. There's also an aspect of data broker networks, where applications sell or share user data with data brokers who aggregate information across multiple sources, create detailed profiles for targeted advertising, sell data to unknown third parties, and use data in ways users never anticipated. And there is also an aspect of regulatory non-compliance, where previous regulations have real teeth. Apps that fail to comply face GDPR violation resulting in fines up to 4% of global revenue, CCPA penalties and class action lawsuits, App Store removal for policy violations, criminal charges in extreme cases. And also, this threat can enable social engineering via privacy data, where attackers can gain access to overcollected data and craft targeted phishing attacks, perform identity theft, conduct social engineering based on personal details, stalk or harass users based on location history. And the critical issue here is users trust apps with their personal data. And when that trust is violated, even unintentionally, the consequences are severe. So let's see how we can prevent and mitigate against this threat. Implementing adequate privacy controls requires a comprehensive privacy by design approach. Implementing this privacy by design is through threat modeling during the design phase, where you can use methodologies like Lindon to threat model against possible violations of privacy controls. So you need to apply data minimization principles, where you collect only the data absolutely necessary for the functionality of your application and request the minimum permissions required ever. Implement progressive permission requests. Ask when needed, not at app launch. Use aggregated or anonymized data wherever possible. Obtain meaningful consent from the end users, where you need to provide clear, plain language explanations of data collection. Offer granular consent options. Never use pre-checked consent boxes, and make consent as easy to withdraw as it is to give. And you also need to re-prompt for consent when purposes change. You need to implement transparency, where you can maintain a clear, accessible privacy policy. Explain exactly what data is collected and why. Disclose all third-party data sharing. Provide in-app privacy dashboards showing collected data. Notify users of privacy policy changes. Provide user control. You need to give users meaningful control over their personal data. Give them access. Let users view what data you've collected. Rectification. Allow users to correct inaccurate data. Deletion. Implement right to be forgotten. Portability. Enable data export in common formats. And restriction. You allow users to limit data processing. Conduct privacy impact assessment. Audit third-party SDKs. Implement privacy-preserving technologies. Establish data retention policies, where you should define clear retention period for each data type. Automatically delete data after retention expires. Securely dispose of data when no longer needed. Document legal obligations for data retention, and implement automated deletion processes. The business impact of this kind of threat is normally high, and the consequences of inadequate privacy controls extend far beyond the technical issues, where mostly you'll face regulatory penalties, where privacy violations result in substantial fines from GDPR up 20 million euros or 4% of annual global turnover, CCPA $2,500 per violation, or $7,500 for intentional violation. COPPA up to $43,280 per violation for children's privacy, and HIPAA up to $1.5 million per violation category annually. And we'll have legal liability, where class action lawsuits from affected users can follow suit. Individual lawsuits under state privacy laws, regulatory investigations, enforcement actions, mandatory audits, and oversight periods. App Store removal. Your application can also be removed from app stores, that is both up on Google. You can also have reputational damage, competitive disadvantage, operational disruption, especially if your application is removed from app stores, you're facing fines and compliance issues here and there, as well as legal battles. So the bottom line for this privacy is that privacy is no longer optional, especially in this age of AI. It's a fundamental requirement for mobile applications enforced by regulations, user expectation, and platform policies. To summarize, privacy must be embedded in every aspect of mobile application design. This means collecting minimal data, obtaining meaningful consent, providing transparency, and giving users control. Therefore, privacy by design isn't just good practice, it's increasingly a legal requirement. Users are entrusting you with their most personal data, and you need to honor that trust. Thank you for watching. This is it for now. See you, and you're welcome.